Welcome to Missing Metabolism. This is Josh. In this two-part episode, I'm joined by special co-host PM, and we speak with veteran civil rights organizer Eric Mann about his journey from his upbringing in New York to his involvement in the political struggles in the 1960s. Mann discusses his early influences, including his parents' activism. He reflects on his work with the Congress of Racial Equality and SNCC, highlighting key campaigns such as Trailways, boycott, and the 1968 Columbia University student strike. Mann also recounts his time as a political prisoner, offering insights into the carceral state and the impact of incarceration on his life and activism. He emphasizes the importance of building a Black-led united front against imperialism and shares his ongoing work with the Labor Community Strategy Center in Los Angeles. Mann's narrative highlights the importance of organizing strategic alliances in the ongoing struggle for liberation. Eric Mann is the co-director of the Labor Community Strategy Center, South Central Los Angeles. He's the author of Comrade George, an investigation into the life and political thought and assassination of George Jackson, Playbook for Progressives, The 16 Qualities of a Successful Organizer, and the forthcoming We Made the Revolution with Our Bodies on the Line. Tim Irvin is a PhD candidate researching the political thought of W.E.B, Du Bois, and 20th century Black radicalism. If you like what we do and want to support our ability to have more conversations like this, please consider becoming a patron. You can do so for as little as $1 a month. We bring you these conversations totally independently with no corporate state or grant funding. Now, here is Eric Mann discussing his life and work.
I wanted to ask a question about the 1968 student strike. You played a leadership role in the 68 student strike at Columbia with SDS, Students for a Democratic Society, and you were working alongside the Black Student Union. And you all made demands for Columbia to shut down its Institute for Defense Analysis, which, of course, has parallels to what's taking place today, both at Columbia and other universities around the country, particularly with universities either having outright institutes of a similar kind or serving the ideological backbone of imperialism and being hedge funds, which are invested materially in the military-industrial complex. But would you like to talk a little bit about your time in this struggle, specifically about the 68 student strike?
I'd love to. The first thing is I urge people to go on Counterpunch, which is my favorite magazine, by a wonderful editor named Jeffrey St. Clair. And they have just the best, it doesn't mean the best, among the best, consistent anti-imperialist analysis. Great writers. And of course, I have to say I'm one of them. I didn't mean, when I say great writers, I forgot I'm one of them. But yeah, I write regularly for them. So there's an article called The 1968 Columbia Struggle, how Harlem, the Students Afro-American Society, SDS, took on Columbia University, the New York Times, the ruling class, the New York PD, Mayor Lindsay, and won. So it's one of the great victories. And the reason, again, I spent 3 months on this is because, again, I studied history. Go in and study the facts. And there's a wonderful guy named Bob Feldman, who is still a friend of mine. Bob Feldman was a member of SDS at the time of Columbia, and he discovered the ties to the Institute for Defense Analyses. So shout out to Bob. And he's read every draft of my SDS chapter before it went to print. But why would I write a 10 or 15,000 word chapter about Columbia? Because the fine grain of this work is what you need to know. Like, somehow I'm having this hypothetical debate with people that say I write too long, which is not a lot, but still. I say, look, if I'm a top brain surgeon, which I am, and a brain surgeon better than me is going to write about the greatest operation he ever had, when I tell him the book is too long, write 7 of them, brother, sister, I hang on your every word. So in that context, this is a long article. And it takes me a long time to figure out what's true because I have my memory. But my memory's not sufficient. I have articles, thank God, I wrote about Columbia, which I didn't even like that much when I reread it. I have a great thing that came out, luckily, another book. You see it here, A Time to Stir, Columbia, 1968, by a guy named Paul Cronin. Got to get that, because that has 20 amazing essays of people that were there, including many leaders of the Black movement. So the first thing is I was in the leadership, but to also understand that I was in what we call secondary leadership. Good organizations have a relatively large leadership team, and I believe in hierarchies in there. I was not in the top leadership, nor could I have been. I wasn't. I came from Boston at the time. But I was an outside agitator, SDS being a national organization, just like CORE. When Columbia called, they said, we need all the best people to come in here because we're up against all these people. And so let's say 10 of us came. I know Tom Hayden came, I came. So when I got there, I was brought into the leadership team by Mark Rudd, Juan Gonzalez, who you know from Democracy Now! He had deep ties to the Puerto Rican community. He was in SDS at the time. The late Lewis Cole wrote a great book about the New York Knicks, and several others. And they said to me, we have a problem, which is, and I'm going to explain this in a minute. We had the strike. I should say we had the sit-in. We had the cops beat up everybody. Now the whole campus is on strike. But now that we have a strike going on, a lot of the moderates are saying we have the right to have opinions on what to do now because we're joining the strike. That's another one of those historic tactical questions. I want you to read the article in A Time to Stir by Raymond Brown, Race and the Specter of Strategic Blindness, which is amazing, and William W. Sales, Self-Determination and Self-Respect, Hamilton Hall 50 years later. Those two have shaped, that's where I have my interpretation. Ray Brown, William Sales, brilliant discussion of the United Front from the Black perspective, which is the people that led the struggle. So read, and they're both very generous to the white students, but what they're trying to say is historically, Columbia, because of the greater prominence of SDS and Mark Rudd, is perceived as a white people's struggle, in which, as Ray Brown said, the Black community is considered ancillary, when in fact, without Harlem and the gym and the Black students, there is no Columbia struggle. So my article talks about that, and so does my book. So basically what happened is nothing's happening at Columbia. SDS is run by what's called a praxis actors, men and women who are doing deep political education. And they have demonstrations, but they don't have an edge. And SDS is perceived to be a really great anti-imperialist education organization. The Students Afro-American Society is new. Many of their students are Black students, first time in college, getting into an Ivy League. And their family is saying, I didn't send you there to do Black power. I didn't send you there. I sent you there to get an Ivy League education so our family and the Black professionals, of which we have not enough, are getting a good education and go out to the world and make things better for our community. So then, Columbia has been working on this gym in Harlem for 3 or 4 years. And when I talk about the geography of racism, in Morningside Heights, apparently there's a hill. And somehow they're going to build this gym on a hill. So if you can imagine, at the top of the hill is open to Columbia University students only. At the bottom of the hill, there's an exit, an entrance for the community, and there's only open for Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from whatever. So the community says, hell no. And they start calling it Jim Crow, G-Y-M Crow. Brilliant. And I argue that the minute they called it Jim Crow, that gym was never going to be built. Because if you win the battle of ideas, when the university said, it's not Jim Crow. I don't like calling it Jim Crow. Then you win it, because even the other side is stuck with that name. So Harlem says, this is imperialist intervention in Harlem. You can't build it. There's a great quote from Rap Brown that I almost know. He says, if they don't let you on the first floor, if they don't let the whole thing, blow it up, or if you take it over, use it for the community. So this gym had become a real symbol of the Black community. And there also had been this struggle with the Institute for Defense Analysis, but the driving force was the gym. And the gym was in Harlem, so it did something great, which is to hold the center of gravity away from Columbia, but Columbia is also a slumlord in Harlem, as I'm sure is Stanford, as I'm sure is I know it's Harvard, USC, oh my God, USC is University of Southern California, is the most imperialist dog in South Central Los Angeles, just constantly expanding, gentrifying, driving people out of their homes. So, according to the narrative, the SDS doesn't feel like the anti-war work is going on, and the Black students don't feel like the campaign on the gym is going on. So they get together and they call it one last try, and it's all towards finals. So they march down to the gym, and they quickly figured out it's an empty lot with a fence around it, which hasn't been built yet. So that's not a really particularly great target. So they march back onto the campus, and they occupy Hamilton Hall, and they have a building occupation. And then the Black students, who are going through a tremendous period of self-determination, say to SDS, you should leave Hamilton Hall and go take over your own buildings. And that was a great idea. And none of that had to do with hostility to whites. Not that's the worst thing, but they saw white people as their ally, but they also saw SDS as kind of scruffy and half hippie and half, they didn't want that. They wanted tight Black discipline. And the leaders of SDS took it really well, and they occupied Fairweather and 4 other buildings. But the Black students, by taking over that, and they changed their name to Black Students, I think, of Columbia University, got Harlem to then come onto the university to defend the Black students. Now, the police came, and in a prearranged exodus, the Black students left with no arrests and no police brutality. Then the police went in and beat the hell out of the FDS students and kicked them out. Now, in terms of the ideology of racism, you actually have some white people and others saying, boy, how come the Black students, I won't even say accuse them of something, as if the white students were so militant. The first thing is the Black students were Black. And the community did not want the police, if they came in to an all-Black structure, that would have been a whole different situation than what they did to the white kids. But also, it was a reflection of power. Who wants to get beat up? It's not inherent. You already occupied the building. You won. And if Harlem is outside his building and the Black students come in with their fist raised, why in the hell do they need to be beat up? It's kind of stupidity of ultra-left and white chauvinist tactics. Yeah, those Black students did get beat up. They've all been beat up their whole life. So if you don't mind, they won. Now, the white students, some of them wanted that fight. Some of them barricaded them in. Nothing wrong with that again. But the historical record, and Kirkpatrick Sale, I'm sorry, in your book SDS, you imply something about the Black students that I think is very unfair. And you wrote a really good book, but this is one of the many big mistakes in your book. And Kirk Sale is a friend and a very great person, but history is history. So then we got a dilemma. The Black students are on the ascendancy, Harlem's on the ascendancy, and yes, police brutality against students does generate mass support. So we don't have to criticize SDS. SDS did what white students do best, which is take more risks in some way because they are less vulnerable. And I would say more complicit, not more privileged. So now we got a problem, which is everybody now says, let's go on a strike. That sounds great, but we had 5 demands. But the most important two are close down Jim Crow and close down the Institute for Defense Analysis. So when I get there, all these people are just doing great. Gus Royaback and just so many others. And they come up to me and say, Eric, we got a problem, which is all these moderate students who didn't do a damn thing during the strike, now they think they have a vote. And through a tactical mistake we did, we constructed a structure where any 50 students can have a vote, like some new democratic structure, which led to the possibility of being outvoted by people who didn't do a damn thing. And I think in retrospect, I don't know why, but I should say it more carefully. I don't know why it was not asserted that the Black students had a 50% plus 1 vote, that no white students could overrun the self-determination of Black students. It wasn't, but they had a certain number of votes. So my job is to get the people who have a vote to understand they don't really have a vote, and they should support the Black students, and they should support the people who did the work, and they should support the Sixth Amendment. This is complicated because white people have a lot of sense of entitlement, and now that I'm here, I know what to do. Plus, the Ford Foundation had organized a rump group inside of Columbia, Students for Accountability or something, I'll get the name of my article, and they came in and said, we really appreciate SDS. Thank you for raising the issue, but now we need a more moderate ability to restore Columbia to a community of scholars and to have, I don't know what, better courses or something like that. Meaning, we're going to co-opt the 2 key demands. So we have a dilemma, which is get these people a vote, but I got to convince them to vote our way. So they even said, Eric, you're better with the liberals than we are. So I remember speaking at this big meeting in the architecture school, let's say 300 people. And I said to them, there's 2 things I want you to understand. 1, your vote is to support the people who are on the front lines to put their bodies on the line. 2, your vote is to support the 6 demands. You don't have the right to wreck the movement, and you don't have a right to vote for genocide. Genocide is not a votable issue. And that was one of my better formulations. And it did get used throughout the campaign, that genocide is not a votable issue. And I did a long conversation with them, talked to them, as I do. You don't want to be this other person. If you did something great, would you want somebody to come in and say, I'll come late to the party, but let me wreck everything you built? And do you really want to pick your vote on napalm, Agent Orange, defoliation, torture, body counts? You can be part of something great. Don't you want to kick Columbia University's ass? Don't you want to help end the war in Vietnam and help Harlem? Come on, let's do this. And then I took a risk. But I had read the audience, and I said, all right, look, how many people agree to support the 6 demands? And more than 85% of people stood up and applauded. So that's what I do. And I got them to enthusiastically support the strike. And Christy, I have the right to blah, blah, blah. But people said, genocide is not a votable issue, bro. So at the end, and the story goes into a lot of things about building up there was great work that was done back in Harlem again on rent strikes. This is like an amazing story, and I did tell it. So we won. Columbia down the Institute for Defense Analysis, which was on its campus. did not build a gym. And a year later, Colombia came out for immediate withdrawal against the war in Vietnam. Lessons. Wow. I think they're mainly inside what I did, but Black leadership, Black and white are critical. Black, white, Mexican, Chicano, a multiracial strategy is critical to not isolate the Black community. They're all Black students, and Harlem, remember, at the university is the enemy of the community. Do not think this is Columbia's right to do anything. Don't legitimize Columbia or Harvard or you're within our university. No, fuck that. You're not loyal to that university. That university is an imperialist construction. You're loyal to the community. You're loyal to the third world. And yes, you may have to get expelled. I don't want you to be, but you can't say, I'm going to take on the university, but I got to stay in the university. I don't mean you don't want to. I'm not saying get expelled, but they don't play the university. And the reason this is important is the university is the ideological, as Leanne says, the ideological center of U.S. imperialist ideological construction. All these people writing these terrible books, even all these professors fighting among themselves about Marxism and writing their book versus the other person's book, they replicate imperialism. And they're phenomenal teachers, phenomenal professors who know this, and are sending their students back into the community. The best teachers have ties to the community. The best teachers bring in community leaders as real experts, defer to the community. There is a model of revolutionary faculty that's very strong. I'm critiquing the university, but not everybody in it. A lot of students are great. A lot of teachers are great. And believe me, I'm talking to a lot of them. And they're in a deep crisis over this. But a lot of them are doing great work. A couple other lessons: Black and Third World united front against U.S. imperialism. Think about Cuba right now in grave danger. Think about Venezuela. I want to say again that I am being organized by the Palestinian students and the anti-Zionist coalition in Colombia and the other universities. I mainly think you're doing great. I have maybe a little bit of advice, but the main advice I have is keep going. You'll figure it out as you go along. I think if you listen to this, my goal is to give you some tools, to give you some analytical cards to play in your meetings that will reinforce most of you what you already know. It's not going to be, oh, wow, I didn't know that. It may be, I was thinking that, but sometimes they go back and forth, and Eric strengthened me to say, you're right. We got to be very careful with this United Front. Do not accuse everybody of being a war criminal. Don't even need to do that. Focus on this genocide against the Palestinian people. We call on you to end the genocide. And I think I have one more thought, and you're being very nice, that I dream in articles, right? So I dream in this article saying, stop anti-Semitism. Stand up to Israel unscrupulous attack on anti-Zionist JEWS in all caps. I'm a Jew. In a totally different, we are Jews who want nothing to do with Israel. We call it the socialist and the communist tradition, the anti-fascist tradition. All the people that went down south, of all the white kids who went down south, half of them were Jews. Imagine that? We were all for Palestine. In 1964, go back and find the SNCC statement on Palestine, which is amazing. So the point is, don't let them pull this anti-Semitic bullshit. And you guys are winning.
Right on. Yeah, thank you for that, Eric. And wanted to shift gears a little bit to talk about your time incarcerated. And we talked about this beforehand and really appreciate your being willing to talk about this. But yeah, our listeners might not know that you were a political prisoner, or that the story of your being incarcerated and how that might be related to questions of risk and unintended consequences as well. So we'd really love to learn from your experiences on this front. And we particularly feel that this would be a major learning experience for listeners who might not even know that this country has had, currently has, and will continue to have political prisoners. So how did you become a political prisoner, and what was your experience with the penal system, both being incarcerated and afterwards? And how did this experience impact you?
I've been meditating on this a lot and reconstructing a lot of things. So for our listeners out there, I'll end with the story that I initiated a demonstration against the Harvard Center for International Affairs, which was just like the Institute for Defense Analyses at Columbia. And I was in a group called Weatherman, which I'll tell you about there. And we broke windows and we wrote "Death to U.S. Imperialism." The CFIA, Center for International Affairs, is murdering third world women. The NRF is going to win. Then we went in, broke windows, knocked over tables. We were running through the place, smashing everything we could. It was just not an attack, a physical attack on people. Not that it couldn't have been, but that wasn't our tactic. Although I was later charged with assault and battery. And again, as Howard Zinn said, that was a nonviolent direct action, which is very important. Not to minimize it, but to simply say nonviolence can be breaking windows, spray painting, can destroy any kind of property. The core of nonviolence is not militancy, it's theoretically attack on another person. I also want to be clear, I do support that as a tactic based on time, place, and conditions, but it is important to understand what Howard was trying to say. So then I went to trial. And we were getting arrested for everything. They were raiding our place. We were in and out of jail, getting bailed out. I went to trial. And everybody thought you get, 30 days, 60 days. Some people said 90 days. And I was sentenced to a year in prison. Now, in retrospect, the harshness of the sentence was appropriate to the harshness of what we did. That is to say, we were trying to up the ante. We were not just nice kids. We were trying to say, we will take you on and we're going to destroy one of your institutions. I don't mean I deserved it. I simply mean that if I had any illusions, the system did not about, it's okay. So, no, this is the American man also, who's right now one of the most high visibility leaders of SDS. He somehow joined this group called Weatherman, and we want to get rid of him as well as this group Weather. So then I was told to appeal. A very wonderful attorney named Bill Holmans, late William Holmans, was a civil rights lawyer. He said, I've never seen a sentence like this. It makes no sense. Under Massachusetts law, you can appeal. And under Massachusetts law, you cannot get more than 1 year in prison because otherwise it was called chill your right to appeal. If you appeal and can get more time, nobody's going to appeal. And that was what we call settled law. So with that reassurance, and Bill also said, look, he did a great job of defending himself because he wanted to make a lot of political arguments. He did great. And he was actually a very good lawyer, which my mother would be happy about. But Eric, I will have a rapport with the judge. Even if I can't, you're going to get convicted. You did the things for which you are charged. But I think we can create a better contextual frame. And these judges know me, and I think there's a good chance I can get to less time. And the worst is you get the same amount of time. So we'll get back into the Weatherman story in a minute. One other thing that's relevant, and this is a consistent theme, is I do not believe the white working class is a white working class. I think it has to be understood as a white fascist class. Again, there are white working people who are great. But when you say the white working class, you better know you were talking about the armed fascist class, which is why 63% of white people voted for Trump. And why They voted for George Wallace in the North. So the other thing we did is we decided we thought we could organize the white working class students. That was the theory. So we went to this high school called Boston English in Boston, which is a classic white working class school trying to have high academic standards for the Irish and Italian white people who Ben Affleck and Matt Damon glorify. And it's ridiculous what they do. So we go in with a Viet Cong flag. We were very bold because the concept was, this is important, the concept of weatherman was what was called the Foucault theory, based on Regis Debray. He had a book called Revolution in the Revolution. He used the Cuban model to say, look what Cuba did. The South Africa, the Cuban Communist Party was there forever, could never do anything. Fidel took a small armed band into the mountains, won kind of tactical battles against the enemy, captured the imagination of people, marched on Havana. The people rose up, and they overthrew the government. In retrospect, a lot of people think that's not even the right interpretation of the Cuban Revolution. But it became a facile story, which is you go out and do something bold, the people will rise up. And weathermen believed that. We also believed that you have to do like the Stalin, so it was based on some theory. You have to do something so outrageous that everybody's going to be mad at you. And then people are going to say, wait a minute, did the Harvard Center for International Affairs work with the Department of Defense to do counterinsurgency work in Vietnam? Is the charge of genocide a legitimate charge? Force people to discuss the CFIA. And then a lot of people in the anti-war movement would say, give them credit. They started this, and I now understand why they did it. So we had a theory, and the theory was not completely wrong, but it was wrong in the sense that it didn't work at all. So we go into the high school, and I have to be honest, to my shock, these white kids start having drawn knives on them. And there's 20 of us, 30 of them, 20 of us, 200 of them. And we were lucky that they didn't quite organize the whole mob again. So this one guy drew a knife on it. And I punched him in the face, and they ran away. We all ran away, get the hell out of here. We were charged with assault and battery on the students. What does that mean? They just make up every black person, every political prisoner. There are no laws, folks. They're just on the books. And they go look and go, I'll pick number 17 up. They're managed to make everything you do illegal. And therefore, whether it's loitering or jaywalking, whatever they want, they will do something you did is going to get you in prison. So I'm now facing 2 charges, one because of the Boston English fight and one at the Harvard Center for International Affairs. Also, I have a child. I'm 25 years old. I have a 2-year-old child named Lisa. He's almost 3 at the time. It was very painful for my family. I will not go into all the details, but it's not like it was very painful to my ex-wife, who felt that this was going to be very harmful because I was a really good father. We did 50-50 with my daughter, and she knew this was something very bad that was going to happen. So when I got sentenced to 1 year, in some way, we could almost say this was less than the worst that we could have thought happened. Also, it's important to understand, I was told by lawyers that with a 1-year sentence, you have a chance for parole after 4 months. You have another chance for parole after 6 months. If you were denied parole, you'd be out in 9 months, which I called time off for good behavior. So at least I felt that whatever cost had been the worst would be I'd be home in 9 months. But I also have to say one other thing, just to say it beyond. I also did it for the children of Vietnam. William L. Patterson told his kids, the communists, "You're my kids, but they're all my kids. And I'm obligated to all the Black children." This was already 1969. The genocide was going on and on. The anti-war movement was not stopping it. Sit-ins, nonviolence, draft resistance. So there was a point where I said, I have to do something. I have to do something beyond the comfortable thing to do, because I don't want to see any more pictures of that napalm on that young chimp's back screaming at the top of our lungs. So I felt, and the other thing I felt is if I was a GI and went to go and kill people, if I was one dropping napalm on them and I was killed, my family would treat me like a hero. They'd come back, give that folded American flag, give me a hero's welcome, 21 Gun salute, and leave me in a box. So those people decided that they're willing to go and kill and be killed. And some of us have to do something. So I'm trying to say that you can be ambivalent about something, but I do not disagree with the choice I made. And one more point we should get to. The difference between in quote retrospect, but in retrospect is not always the main point. At that moment, I did what I have to do. It was a theory, I believed it. I carried it out. I have no bitterness towards it, no disavowing of it, recanting of it. You do the best you can. You make the choices, and you can't control always the outcome. So I go to trial. And another thing I would say is, at my first trial, there were 250 people there. Stacked the courtroom. For my second trial, the courtroom was almost empty because Weatherman had played itself out. We did not have the mass base that we thought, and it was very terrifying to go into that courtroom. And as I say in my book, a jury of retired Klansmen, white Klansmen in the North, took one look at me and said to the judge, "Do we have to go to the trial, or can we just convict him now?" It was, as soon as I saw them, I thought, I don't care if you're Clarence Darrow. There's no way there's many sympathies. So we went through the trial. Of course, I was convicted. So I understand I'm going to prison now for 1 year. The judge says, "1 second, I'm going to discuss the sentence," and he goes out. When he comes back, these two Cambridge police detectives hold up 2 fingers like V for victory. And then the judge comes out and says, "I sentence you to 2 years in prison and 3 more years in probation and a suspended 2-year sentence," which means any time during that 3-year probation, if you violate probation, you can go back for 2 more years with no trial. So all of a sudden I think, wait, I'm now under state custody for 5 years. And as I'm discussing the unfairness of it, they put a handcuff on me and take me into a paddy wagon. And I'm going, when's my next appeal? When am I going to get bailed out? And I realize there are no more cards to play. This is it. And Bill says, "This is outrageous. We're going to appeal." I'm going, "God damn it, Bill. Appeal? You know what, in 2 years you made a decision? You told me they couldn't do this." And this is another thing that's very important. Often the lawyers are simply telling you this is everything they know under the circumstances. And we're certainly seeing with Trump, and I believe with Clinton and Biden and Obama, they keep changing the laws to make them worse and worse, and they take away your rights. So it wasn't Bill's fault. He advised me under every single precedent. But another reason I'm a political prisoner, obviously because I carried out a political act, is the sentencing against me was crazy. And they violated their own precedent to dramatically increase my sentence, which I had been tricked into doing because I had been assured that there was a maximum sentence I could get.
So I'm also curious about your time inside, and if you could also speak to your experiences being shipped out, I believe that's the term, and
Yeah.
just talk a little bit about that, and then also the work that you began doing afterwards once you got out.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And in many ways, it is one continuity as one subject. Let's see. I just want to say one more thing about risk and consequences. If you join a movement in a police state, you have to understand something very bad can happen to you, whether you're joining Weatherman or not. One of the most tragic stories I ever hear is that a young man named Andrew Goodman, Jewish kid from New York, goes down to Meridian, Mississippi. In his first day, he writes a letter to his mom saying, I am so happy here. The people are so good to me. I'm just so glad I made this decision. And by the time she gets the letter, he's dead. He was murdered the second day on the job. Now, other people went down south and lived to speak about it. There's other people that say, I'll be in the front of the demonstration and I'm willing to take the risk. And other people say, I don't want to take that much risk. Is it okay if I'm in the middle? And we say, fine. And then the cops attack the middle. So I'm speaking a lot to the people taking risks today, how much I love you, how much I care about you. But certain reassurances cannot be made, is my point. That no, we do not want organizations taking provocative action. We don't want organizations taking risks with people that are not appropriate, but you don't know what that means to support. Every group is doing the best it can. So what I'm getting to is I joined Weatherman. I carried out the actions. There were consequences. They shaped my life. I'm at peace with that. And then I move on to prison.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So would you like to talk about your time inside as well? And
I'd love to. I wrote a book, and I don't apologize. As you see, I think in books, I write books, I read books. Books are my friend. So I wrote a book, short book called The 7 Components of Transformative Organizing Theory, which is a companion to Playbook. And for listeners who want to get a copy of Playbook, you can go on our website. Is this okay?
yeah, of course.
So we'd like you to go on the website, thestrategycenter.org. You go to Strategies and Soul Books. We have our own bookstore. We love books. And you'll scroll down and you'll see my book called Playbook for Progressives, The 16 Qualities of a Successful Organizer. You'll also see my book, Dispatches from Durban, Firsthand Commentaries on the World Conference Against Racism. And you'll see my book, Katrina's Legacy, The Black Nation and the People of the World, Confront the U.S. Imperialist Genocidal State, White Settler State. So there are 3 books I've written on that site. Sorry. So the point is that when I go to prison, the first thing that happens is, I don't know what the hell's happened. It's like I'm in the back of a car, of a van with 10 guys. We're all handcuffed. I don't even know where I'm going. And they tell me you're going to the Billerica House of Correction. So I get there, and it's funny. It's not exactly denial, but it probably is denial. I can't imagine what this experience is to be like, but I'm going to figure it out. So I get there, and I'm brought into this crazy warden, John Kariakis. And he goes, so, what's your name? I said, Eric Mann. He says, see, I don't even know your name. So I got no issues with you. But if you're a communist, I have no problem with communism. Is what you can read all your communist books. What's your name again? I said, Eric Mann. See, I got no issues with you. I don't even know your name. So I go, this guy's a fucking lunatic. So he says, now listen, these guys in there, they're very impressionable. They're not too intelligent. you're an intelligent guy. I know you went to Cornell, so this is what I suggest. You read your books, keep your nose clean, or get you out of here in 8 months or something like that. So I said, okay. I don't agree with what he's saying, but I'm just trying to get out of there. So I walk in, and on all the TVs, it says, there's about 6 TVs in this game room. It's a big, maybe like cafeteria-like thing with these metal picnic tables, 4 on each side. And all the TVs are going, Eric Mann, dangerous weatherman, finally sentenced to prison. And I had this little momentary moment of celebrity. Can't be too bad because I'm on TV. So then they put me in my cell. And by the time we get out, it's Jerry Jones was caught shoplifting, and I'm yesterday's news. So I realized that this is my life. And I'm going to talk most of the time about Deer Island and Concord State Prison. But I had a very interesting experience because during Weatherman, we kept talking about the white working class, the white working class. We couldn't organize any of it. So I walk in to the general population, and the white guys come up to me. The Billerica was probably 80% white. Yeah, maybe 15% black. And one guy's name is Charlie Kraft. Next guy is Jimmy Drummy. Next guy is Ronnie Chavo. Charlie's the more central figure. He's like a very well-known small-time gangster. He seems to always get 2 years, which is lucky misdemeanor, for fencing stolen goods, stuff like that. So he says, we want to welcome you here, and we really like you a lot. And we think we want to become communists. It's a true story, by the way. It's so ironic. I said, wait a minute, first of all, I have to be careful. I'm not a communist, whatever. And I said, let me tell you why we became communists. He says, before you got here, they knew you were going to be convicted, of course. And so the guards were getting us ready. And they said, do you know this guy, Eric Mann? They said, no. He's a damn communist. And we hate communists, right? And so I said, yeah, I think I do. He said, so we're together and we all hate the communists. And when he comes in, I want you guys to work him over. So Charlie, being a very intelligent working class intellectual, says, yeah, sounds good, Joe. And after Joe leaves, he says, wait a minute. I've never seen the screws. This guy could have been a mass murderer. They wouldn't have warned us. What are they so afraid of about him? And if the screw is trying to tell me that we're together against this guy, and he's the guy locking me up, I'm for this guy. And communism must be a good thing, given how much the guards hate it. So it really happened. And the 3 of them came up and became my protectorate. And that was very important. In every prison, people saw my vulnerability. Like they would say, you're the only one who was in here for doing something good. But they knew there was anti-communism, but they also knew stuff was crazy. And the guards would possibly attack me and do stuff. So they created these sort of self-constructed defense teams for me. And I always had a kind of following, with them being the stronger figures. But I also came to love the prisons, and this is very important. My experience is not applicable today, so it's very important. I walked into a brief moment in history of massive prison reform, especially in the Massachusetts prison system. I can go back and study more how national this was, but this was 1970, 71. They were, and yes, they were doing a relatively humane imprisonment. What I mean by that is there was very little brutality from the guards. Everybody had their own cell. And you have to remember this was misdemeanor. So these are people who were just doing 2 years max, younger, a lot of drug kids and petty criminals doing stuff. So it wasn't the roughest time. Today I could be in a prison with 4 in a cell. I could just have a cot in the middle of a saying I could have great race wars going on, cops shooting people. And so I just want to say it's important to contextualize, if you're listening to me in prison, that prison back then is frankly what it should do if you have a prison, which is confinement. Now, obviously, we can get into that you don't need prisons, but there's a difference between confinement and torture. I was confined, but I was not tortured. The other thing I noticed in prison is there's a certain way that you like your routine after a while. You get up in the morning, the bell rings, you get up, you go to eat this crappy food. One prisoner let you out for 2 hours, then you go back to your cell, then you get out, you go back, the bell rings, so you're like a Pavlovian dog after a while. And there's some comfort in knowing the routine. So you know you're going to wake up in the morning and do your push-ups. Then if you want to take a nap, you know when you're going to do it. You know what you can get at the commissary. The books are allowed to be there. You read your book. I worked out a lot in the cell, plus there's weightlifting out there. And you get moderately comfortable. I even talk to guys in solitary who have the most ferocious routine. Terrible. Like I remember Russell Ron Schultz in his book saying, he takes 3 hours of intensive working out to beat the depression. So there's all kinds of minor prison rebellions taking place. And at one point they come in and I'm sitting in my cell, I'm sleeping, it's 2 a.m. And the cell opens up and these 2 guys who are not prison guards, never seen them before, say, all right, man, get your stuff. I said, wait, what are you talking about? And they put handcuffs on me. And my stuff was very little, was in the box. I said, where are you taking me? They said, none of your business. So for those prisoners who have been shipped out, for those families, that's called being shipped out, I'll get to, for those families of prisoners who have been shipped out, this is one of the worst crimes of all because you're kidnapped. You're already being kidnapped, but it's another level of kidnapping. So I'm in the backseat of this car. And I remember looking out there and there's all these people walking down the street, free air. And I'm thinking, nobody knows I'm being kidnapped. I could be taken anywhere and nobody gives a damn. If I was in the street, I wouldn't see a car going down and think. So I keep saying, where are you going to take me? They will not tell me. And I ended up at Deer Island Prison. Now, I had a very close friend at Billerica named Bobby. We call him Bobby Cape Verde. He was from Cape Verde. And he's black and African. And he said, I'm getting the fuck out of Billerica. I'm getting a transfer to Deer Island where there's black people. How he got the transfer, I don't know, but he did. So when I get there, Bobby's waiting for me. And there's another welcoming committee. This time it's Hardy, who is a very dark-skinned Jamaican, Bubba, a light-skinned, bald black man, we call him Bubba the Mystic. And the 4 of us were just inseparable. When we did everything, Bobby introduced me. One of the interesting things, so I went over my first meal, there was hot sauce on the table. I'd never been allowed to have hot sauce in prison. So welcome to little benefits. But Gilroy was a big people's grown-ups prison. Maybe 500 to 1,000 people there. And the first couple of days, I'm just with the team. And all of a sudden I look across the aisle and I was, oh my God, there's all the white people on one side and I'm in the black section. No, I knew it, but there was a moment of flowing grasping that pretty much I'm the only white guy on the black side. And there's a big, what do you call it? An aisle. There's tables on one side and the white guys are looking at me kind of incredulously and felt like it feel with almost envy and others with anger and others with God knows what. And I realized that, yeah, I am comfortable. I'm honored, by the way, and comfortable, but I want to reach these white guys. I'm not trying to be the white guy in the black world. So I built relationships with a lot of them. And a lot of them were great. They were significant anti-racist whites in prison. Can't say before or after, but also it's a majority black prison. So a lot of the white prisoners, and these are also young guys, they were drug guys, and they came more out of the counterculture. So I lifted weights every day. Deer Island had a big yard. I went into I got an assignment to work in the, what do you call it? It's a place where you make the uniforms. You make the prison uniforms. And it was an easy job. It wasn't really much of a job. But I got in there, and this guy, Frank Nitti, comes up to me, and he's got gold teeth, and he's got French cuffs on, and Bobby said he's going to hook you up. So you're allowed to have custom-made prison shirts. And for 4 packs of cigarettes, everything was done in cigarettes. Was my point that the time was relatively easy for depressing in fucking prison. Also at your hours, you're locked up at 3 o'clock. It's crazy. So you get up in the morning, you go out all day, you have lunch, you go back, you run 2 hours out. At 3 o'clock, you're into breakfast. It was long and depressing. But this guy would come with coffee every night, a big jug of cream and sugar coffee with tons of sugar. I loved it. I would write to my daughter, Lisa, every night from prison. I'd write her stick figures and funny things and mail them out. And then Dr. Rader, who was a queer, radical writer, a very good friend, he would visit me a lot. And I'm somewhat isolated from the outside world. So you can ask later what happened in prison about my consciousness. It was very internal. It was hanging around with the guys, lifting weights, building relationships, doing time. I was reading like a fiend. So the other thing about 3 o'clock is I read. And yes, I kept lifting weights. When George Jackson said he did 1,000 fingertip push-ups in his cell, I did 100. But the point is, a lot of guys we work out. That's one of the few self-respecting things you can do is fuck you. You may lock me up, but even in my cell, I can come up with stuff. Let me think a minute of greater significance. Oh yeah. Back in Billerica is Cambodia and Kent State. And I felt so helpless because all these students are running around. And one of the things that would happen is they were going on strike and going home. And I was saying that's exactly what the university wants you to do. Don't go on strike, occupy. Not that nobody did that. But then I became more critical of weathermen. I said, for God's sake, we took 300 of the best white SPS organizers who all had the leaders of Columbia, the leaders of every single campus. And we scooped up 300 of us into a very self-defeating enterprise, which left the mass movement with less mass organizers. And then I felt, so that's when my critique of weathermen became not existential, but more strategic. And also I felt very powerless, that I had felt I was a historical figure, and now I'm just a prisoner. So I'm back in Deer Island, and I can tell you a lot of nice stories. Bubba would teach me about hobo coffee. He probably had been houseless. He said it's very simple. You pour the hot water, you throw the grounds in, and you wait till they fall to the bottom. So there were things like that. And then the guys want to have serious demonstrations over the food, over the treatment, over being locked up at 3 p.m. And they would come to me and say, what do you think we should do? And I said, the main thing I should do is let's get the hell out of here. We're all doing 2 years or less. I'm worried you're going to lose your parole. They could show you good time. I'm just saying you have to consider the consequences. But I'm mainly here to do political education, and I want you all to get out and join the movement this year. But they said, yeah, that's all good, but fuck it. I don't want to, I'm not that strategic. I'm tired of this shit. And they could take away my good time. I don't care. I want to do something. So this is important. So I said, okay, I'm in. They said, but you shouldn't go out. But everybody knows who you are. Also, it's going to take away our agency because they're going to swear you led it. And I said, that's pretty funny because I'm definitely not leading it. In fact, you're leading me into it. And they said, yeah, Betty, plus when we get back, you can do this sum ups and strategic stuff. So one good thing is you also have sometimes screws who are decent people. It's important to not stereotype. You're looking for allies any way you can. So there were a couple of guys who were just, I don't know, you're not going to believe it, college students, graduate students who just needed a job or something like that. So I had one guy who was very sympathetic. So I smuggled out a note to two friends of mine. One was named Danny Schechter, we should look up. There's a story about him in Counterpunch I wrote. He was my first teacher at Cornell, exact same age. He went on to become Danny Schechter, your news dissector, on a station called WBCN in Boston. He later went on to become, he did a South Africa Now show on PBS. He was super close with Mandela and essentially part of the ANC doing the work in the U.S. Great guy. He died about 10 years ago. So Danny had a show, and there's another guy called Charles Laquidera. Google him too. Laquidera. He had a show, something called The Big Mattress. But this was a time, I'm trying to figure the music in 71, more kind of white rock, what these stations were, but very political. BCM was very political. So I got the notification to both Charles and Danny that the guys are going to sit in tomorrow. It's really critical that they get coverage because these prisons are like, they're locked to the public. Nobody knows what's going on. And without public attention, I'm worried what's going to happen to the guys. So they had the sit-in. I did not go, as instructed. And Danny Schechter, your news dissector, said, the prisoners at TRR and are fighting for their rights. These are their 6 demands. Call the warden and tell them, number 1, keep your hands off them. And number 2, call on them to meet the 6 demands. Now, back then, not like this. We had an actual audience of people that would take action, a lot, because these were still SDS times and radicals and plus a lot of Black Panthers at the time. So whatever happened, I'm not sure if they probably won some of the demands, but there was not retaliation, which is amazing. It gets, when we talk later about what are we going to do, like bringing attention to the special housing units, to the torture going on. But this was a more hopeful time where we had more cards to play. So I was feeling great. I did a good job. And then at 3 a.m, they come in my cell and handcuff me and say, man, get your stuff. I go, what the fuck? He said, we know you behind the demonstrations and we're kicking you out of here. So again, the number of prisoners today who are like, you're in a prison, you're an hour away, your family visits you regularly, and they ship you out to someplace 5 hours away or to another state, which is, again, one of those, you can't do that, but they do that. It's terrifying. And then the family has to, God knows what the family does, and the horror of pain it causes the family. And being shipped out is very jarring. Needless to say, you go to bed, you're in your one bed, and I'm going, what the hell? Where are they going to send me? and I am in Concord State Prison. Now, Concord State Prison, now I'm in the big time because I'm just laughing at the capriciousness of the law. I'm not allowed to be in Concord State Prison because that's for people who committed felonies. And I only committed a misdemeanor. And what's the point? If you're a political prisoner, they make up the rules as they go along. So I get to Concord State Prison, and it's enormous. I'll have to go check, but they had at least 1,000 inmates, if not more. And I quickly figure out, this is great. This place is great. It's modern. It's clean. So they take me into a holding area, like to be evacuated. And I'm just saying, please let me just get the hell into this place. I have 6 months left. I'll finish out my term. We'll go with my family. And this guy comes to interview me, the warden, O'Shaughnessy. But I have a guy that's taking care of me. He's like the head of this holding group. There's maybe 40 of us. Blonde guy with a crew cut, military in his 40s, great posture. And he and I start talking. And I said, look, I really, truly want to do my time. I want to get out of here. I want to get home. I want to see my family. And we get to be in a certain way close. Senator O'Shaughnessy comes in, interviews me, and then I'm released into the general population. But before I am, this guy who was in charge says, O'Shaughnessy wanted to ship you out again to some fucking place way in the under western Massachusetts. And I told him no. I told him this is my goddamn job. And I'm the one who does the evaluation. This guy is a straight guy. And he's got his politics and I got mine. He believes in what he's doing. He's against the war. I'm for the war. But he's a legitimate adversary. And he's maybe a prisoner of war, but we got to treat him with dignity. And I'm overriding you. Now, he couldn't hypothetically because I was the warden. But he says, either go get the fuck out of here or I don't want this job. I find out later. So what is the point? Don't write off any contradiction. Without that guard, I don't get the message out to Danny Schechter. Without this guy, I'm in Western Massachusetts. There are decent people in the prison. And there's gradations of people in the prison. Some will torture you. Some won't torture you. Some will do this. Some will get to your food. Some will piss in your food. When you're under the police state, and all the prisoners listening, you know what I'm saying. These differences matter. And anybody who trivializes them, I ask them, you served the time. And you have somebody piss in your food versus give you your food. You have somebody beats you or doesn't beat you. Just a little bit of humility, please. So that was a good story, but it was a scary story. So then I'll finish up. So Concord was super modern. And I became a professional athlete, an amateur athlete. We had a football team. And if you see the film, The Longest Yard, I mean, our yard was bigger than a football field, too. I also created our championship softball team. I lifted weights 3 times a day, wrote letters. And maybe there's more I could remember, but I don't think there was no political movement in the prisons at that time. I was running political collectives. That's to say, meeting with prisoners, we would read Comrade George. Well, that's like Freudian. We'd read Mao. I was allowed to get those books in. I was very well respected by the majority of prisoners. And I was mainly doing time. So the last month of my term, the guys run up and say, hey, Eric, they just had you appeal and they're letting you out. I'm going, fucking great. I've served 17 months. I don't want to get out. I got 1 month to tie up my business here. And nice of them to spend 17 months discussing this. Then the guy came back and he didn't mean anything wrong. So I'm so sorry, I got it wrong. The court ruled she's not getting out. I said, but one thanks to the courts. But the fact is, they had appealed my case, become a famous case, in which they changed the law to say, in that the appeal is a new trial, the defendant has what we call second bite of the apple. That was their term. If he has a second bite of the apple, he should be able to be sentenced to more time. What does that mean? Nothing. They just make it up as they go along. So I had 1 month left. And the reason I don't want to leave is by now I really had 50 pretty close friends. And, oh, one more thing. I learned yoga in prison. One of the coolest things. We had this little game room that made cards. Maybe it held 7, 8 guys. Well, we took out the tables, and there was 20 of us in there sweating. But there was this beautiful brother, big afro, with freckles and red hair. He knew the yoga, and we became great at yoga. And I do it to this day, but it also says prisoners are real people who are going to try to find some way to survive, and just the resiliency of what they gave me. So then I met with each guy. I went around and said, what do you need? He said, all right, look. And I had a notebook. My wife is not getting enough money. You got to call my mother and ask her to do this. Call my lawyer because I haven't heard from them. Can you send me some books? Can you send me some money? Oh, I couldn't do everything, but I had everybody's request. So when I left, I had 50, I think there were obligations. It was an obligation. I was obliged. I mean, I knew what it was like. And these guys were doing heavier time, by the way. I remember that. Yeah, they're doing 5 years, 50 years, 20 years. And I said, I'll keep my promises. I will. And I knew that was going to be a job because I had 50 brothers. And when I left, it was like, maybe it sounds funny, a certain ambivalence because I felt I was abandoning my brothers who were taking good care of me, protected me. And I allowed love for them, and they had a lot of that for me. I think it is worth saying that it seems like wherever I go, I'm good at making connections and people care about me and they know I care about them. So I get out of prison and this is important, a woman named Sarah Driscoll and my brother Richard Mann. Richard was at Yale. It was a relationship with Sarah. They were New Haven. Richard came up to visit me and Sarah when I was at, I don't remember, I think at year round. And my brother said, I want to move to Cambridge to help you because you need more of a support system. And he and Sarah moved to Cambridge and took care of me. And we need people to take care of prisoners, getting their letters, helping them, any little thing to even know that you're not alone in there. So I was well taken care of. So I got out. And like I say, I don't remember what the hell I was going to do. It was like, hey, I can rethink of my options. So I get out in July, about July 15th. I think August 21st, I got to get the date. George Jackson is murdered. Oh, damn. And I'm already somehow in Berkeley to go see my daughter. So already in Berkeley in August. Then I come back and Howard then calls me up and says, did you know what happened at Attica? I said, Attica, no. He tells me what's happening, that they're holding hostages. And then Nelson Rockefeller murders 33 people. So as I say, I got out in July, August, George is killed, September, Attica. And then I'm approached by both the Attica Brothers Defense Committee, then in Big Black and others. I'm approached by the San Quentin Six, even though it was Solar Guy brother, John Cluchette, Fleeta Drumgo, others. Somehow they're saying, we need you to tell our story and be a writer. I'm not a professional writer, but I learned. And I spent the next few years mainly writing about the prisoners movement, writing about prisoners, trying to bring greater attention to the prisoners. And I worked for the Boston After Dark, the Boston Phoenix, the Boston newspaper. Back then, there were papers that could actually pay you.
Yeah, absolutely. And that leads us actually flawlessly into our next question, right? That you have written like numerous books, including Comrade George, an investigation into the life, political thought, and assassination of George Jackson, which was published only 3 years after George Jackson was killed, and only a few years since you were a political prisoner yourself. And so the book is widely out of print, and we hope to change that soon, of course. And we would love to have you on again to discuss the contents of the book more at length. But in the meantime, can you just talk a bit about the making of this text and what drove you to it? What made you connect with George Jackson, his story as well? I mean, just anything else you would like to offer as reflection with regard to that text.
I just want to say again that this is an interesting experience for me because I'm both trying to give everybody listening, and I really appreciate it. I don't know if you're still listening, but if you are, thanks a lot. I'm trying to both theorize the work, but always re-inhabit it. If you're an actor and you do the method acting, every night you can't deliver your lines. You have to re-inhabit the character. Otherwise, there's a great book called The Method that I'm reading about acting. And the theory is that if you do not directly experience the character, you're not acting. You're just carrying out lines. So what I'm getting to, Josh, is as you're asking these questions, I am back in 1971. You know what I mean? I'm there. And I'm trying to re-understand things through the lens of who I was at the time. So I appreciate the question.
Of course, by the way.
Yeah. So the first thing to understand is what I didn't explain and memory is one of the things I did a lot in prison, of course, was read. But I also was very influenced by the Black arts movement and by this kind of Sonia Sanchez and Don L. Lee and Etheridge Knight. There were three Black poets, and Sonia's, I think, Black Puerto Rican. And I loved their poetry, and I lived inside that rage, and Nikki Giovanni, and I read. And when Soledad came out, I got a copy, and it was called Soledad Brother, The Prison Letters of George Jackson. I never heard of George Jackson. But those letters are sensational literature. And this man is one of the most brilliant writers. And it's a lot talking to his mother, Georgia, his fights, not his fights, his arguments with his mom, his father, theories of capitalism and imperialism. He's like a brilliant scholar, but also a poet. And he writes, and for our comrades out there, you got to read Mao's, what's it called? Something like Combat Stereotype Party Writing. That you got to write from the soul and not mechanically. George Jackson is just one of the great intellectuals of our time. And so I'm reading it, and I'm like hanging on every word. I'm in a cell, and this man who wrote it is in a cell. And he was like 17 years old. He got involved with some kind of a stick up at a gas station. And the public defender told him to cop a plea, and he was sentenced to what was called an indeterminate sentence, which back then was argued as progressive because you were confined for 3 years or 5, but it turned out you could also be kept in for your whole life. And that's what happened to George. So I'm reading it, and it's strengthening me. I feel like I'm George, not meaning I am George Jackson anymore. George Jackson's talking to me. George Jackson is helping me. So if I'm put in the hole of anything, I have Nelson Mandela talking to me. I have George Jackson talking to me. And, I must have read that book just 7, 8, 10 times. I didn't want it to end when it ended. I just went back to page 1 and started again. And it was the most transcendental, emotional, intellectual experience, I think, of any book I read. So I was very close, and I thought when I come out of prison, I don't know, I'm going to go visit George Jackson. So with no aspiration. I had no plans to do anything. So I'm in Berkeley to visit my daughter, Lisa, who's now, I don't know, I'll say 4 or 5. And I'm walking down Telegraph Avenue, and these people say, come to the rally tonight to protest the murder of George Jackson. And I go, no, you mean Jonathan Jackson, his brother, who was engaged in a shootout in Marin County. It's a whole other story. They said, no, George Jackson, who was just murdered today in San Quentin. So I must have had ties already as some kind of writer that I didn't know. And I don't know where. I called the Boston Phoenix and said, I'm in Berkeley, and George Jackson's just been murdered. I want to do a story about it. And imagine this is these magazines at the time, they'd been the, what do you call it, the underground press. But by now, there's I can explain them. I'm sure they exist today. I just can't. They are very political, but they're funded by the record industry. So they have big ads for music and concerts, and they have a budget, a serious budget. And I didn't need much money, so we said something like, give you $300 and whatever you need to stay out there, do the story. So what is the story? I don't know anything about this. I don't know about the California prison system. I don't know about George Jackson's life outside of Soledad Brother. And I'd like to actually write myself the story of how I wrote this book, but it started with this long article. And I remember somewhere in it. So I do the first draft. I'm in Berkeley. And I went to a woman named Karen Wold to check her out. Karen was a friend of mine from Cornell. She had gone on to become very close to Eldridge Cleaver, who's white, and very close with the Cuban government, almost like their press secretary. So I wrote my first draft and showed it to her. And she just tore it up. Eric, your opening's not right. You buried your lead. You have no sense of proportion. An important point you make small, a big point you make big. You raise the point first and then second, then you lose it, then you do that. And but it's a great article. Keep going. I said, oh, God. Until that, I didn't know what to say. But she taught me writing as the point. And I've always, of course, my wife's an editor. Not the only relationship, but I do love editors because it's such an art. It's such an art. Joanne Vipievsky at The Nation. It's such an art to take work and help the writer figure out what it is you want to write. They're not trying to get you to change what you want to write, but there's so much to learn about writing. So then I went to LA and stayed with Tom Hayden, and he read my draft. He said, it's great, but you don't have any relationship with George to the Black Panther Party. I said, oh my God, you're right. But because I didn't know, so I had to study that. So it was the strangest thing where it's not like I knew the story, but I just needed writing help. I wrote the story in the process of writing the story. And I'm a very good researcher. So I would talk to everybody, and this person would, just like organizing this, but no, you got to talk to this woman, Betsy. She's in a relationship with this guy in the joint. And I don't know if you can understand this, but of course you can. When a subject is bigger than you, your brain is not big enough to hold it because the story is bigger than your capacity. But over time, the story becomes clearer and you stretch capacity. So there's a point where your brain is big enough to hold the story and you're just beginning to understand the contours, because this is involving the history of the California prison movement, George Jackson, Soledad Prison, San Quentin 6, George's political development. So I don't know how long the article was. It's certainly 5,000 or 6,000 words at least. Back then, that was a lot. And I sent it FedEx to my editors, Harper Barnes and Stu Irvin. went on to be a big writer for Rolling Stone. And when they got off the plane, they said, meet me in whatever Italian town is in Boston. So we go to this great Italian restaurant, and I'm waiting. They're not telling me anything. And they're nervous. And I don't know. They said, all right, look, it's amazing, but we want to make it into a 3-part series because this is great, but each thing needs to be elaborated. Plus, you're onto a lot of other stories and evolving stories. So I thought, oh my God, yes. And you can go back. So what started out as 5,000 words probably ended up with 15,000 words. And each time, I remember I didn't like the draft. I didn't like the draft. I didn't like the draft. And then all of a sudden, it starts to come together. And again, I had to stretch my understanding of being a writer. I had to find the emotional feel for the whole thing. But throughout, I was talking to George. That's important. George was guiding me. And I don't think this is metaphysical, by the way, or maybe it is, but then it's a good word. I believe in spirits. I believe in the dead and talk to you. And he was talking to me. Make sure you say this. Make sure you say that. When we do the book, I'll tell you more of the content. I'll go study it more systematically. But this is very important. In the book, Comrade George, just to talk a little about it in a minute, I talk about George's military strategy, right, which is also developed more in Blood in My Eye. And George was focusing a lot on urban guerrilla warfare. And I remember thinking, this is not the essence of George Jackson. Some people, I'm worried they're going to grab onto this and make his specific political observations into a strategy that will say, well, as George Jackson said. And I thought that was not quite trivializing, but limiting a genius. That George Jackson was writing about fascism. George Jackson was writing about the white mind, about art, about the Panthers, existential issues, family, and Black liberation in America with a K. And yes, all prisoners dream of getting out and carrying out some serious mayhem. I don't know anybody in prison saying, I'm going to write an article. But it's not, when we get into discussion of Comrade George, I'm going to take very seriously his political thought. But luckily, when I went back and read it, I already began to have friendly, if not critique, to say there's some limits to George's political thought, because it's called an investigation to like political thought and assassination. His political thought is beyond his tactics about the armed struggle. And I've been going, PM, you and I have been talking, and we all share the concept, by the way, just hear me out. I do not think Trump is the only fascist. I think Biden is a fascist. I think if you believe the genocide against oppressed nations, how can that not be fascism? How can you say the United States killed 4 million people in Vietnam, but that's not fascism? What is it? So I totally disagree with, not that what Trump isn't doing may be qualitatively different in some ways, but what Biden did in Ukraine is more fascist. What is my point? That George Jackson was the first person who said, America is fascist. And it's evolved fascism. His work on understanding fascism, his understanding of psychology. One reason we all love George is he was so transparent in his conversation with his mom. And I get to end by saying that he ended one letter to somebody saying, Comrade George. That's where I got the title. But in prison, we all called him Comrade George. By then, that's his name. So when I wrote my book, it was pretty obvious what the title was going to be. And I think I should really be more aware and proud, because that's the only real book on George Jackson. And it's a damn good one. And I'll just tell you one thing, Josh, that's interesting. It's not out of print because it's contraband in every prison. And every prison is, I don't know how they mimeograph it. And I met this almost every time I meet a prisoner, ex-prisoner. I say, I'm Eric Mann. Eric Mann, you wrote Comrade George. Yeah, you could get put in a hole for that. We're all reading Comrade George. Thank you. So it is both out of print, but we're going to get it in, and we're going to get into the prisons. But it's important to know that it has a life. And even though it's redundant, I want to just focus again that I did a really good thing with the Freedom Archives that should go online and see the 99 books. It was a celebration of George's, the 99 books they found in his cell. And it has testimonials from Angela Davis, a lot of people, and me. And the main thing I said is George Jackson was one of the great revolutionary intellectuals, and the denigration of the Black mind, the denigration of the Black intellect is maybe the most grotesque form of imperialist anti-Blackness. And I want people to not focus on George's 1,000 figurative push-ups, which is also cool, and not his ideas on guerrilla warfare, which is also cool, but to read him as the totality of one of the great political thinkers of our time.
Absolutely. That's a perfect place to end this off of. And so thanks again, Eric. Thank you so much for your time. But before we let you go, I would love for you to just tell folks where they can keep up with you and what you're doing.
Well, thanks, Josh. So first of all, I do a lot of work on gratitude. I'm filled with gratitude. And I just want to know to PM and Josh, the generosity you've had towards me, the belief, the fact that I know you're listening and care allows me, you could say, to even perform well. Because I don't have voices in your head like they may not want to hear this or going on too long. And I never felt that. I felt tell your story, so that I could get deep into the story and deep into the theory. And again, I want to tell the people listening that PM and Josh and I have been preparing. We had prep meetings. We had questions back and forth. And the relationship means so much to me. I want you to really know that. It just means so much to me, and it's enlightening my own life. So let me tell you, we're going to get to my present, but Josh has asked me to give you a little bit of a how to reach me, what's going on, what are we doing? And I'd love to, because that's the main point, right? My main point for all of you who care, I know what I'm saying, but write to me, and we'll have to figure out if there's only a few. That'd be great. If there's a lot, I'll get somebody to help me. But my email is eric@voicesfromthefrontlines.com. You're also going to write to Tanya at thestrategycenter.org, who's our administrator, and wait till she gets all these emails, and to Channing, who I'll talk about, at thestrategycenter.org. There's also Akuna Uka, who I'll talk about, and Barbara Holland. But it's Channing and I will be we're co-directors of the center, and Tanya's the administrator. And boy, folks, even if you have a collective of volunteers, get somebody who's good at administration. Because if somebody got to learn how to run the stuff. And Tanya's pretty terrific. So, the Labor Community Strategy Centers existed since 1989. We're going to get to that story later. But we're built on the Black-led Third World United Front against U.S. and European imperialism. But we've always been very strongly Black and very multiracial. But since 2015, we decided to become just an overwhelmingly Black organization. And we call it with Afrocentric thought. So we moved to South Central Los Angeles. We have this beautiful 4-storefront complex called the Strategy and Soul Movement Center. And you should go and check us out at thestrategycenter.org. So one office has the Black folks on bikes, which I'll tell you about, the Bus Riders Union, and all of our organizing projects, including the Strategy and Soul high school groups. The second is our bookstore, Strategy and Soul Books, which has theoretically the 100 books that every organizer should read in a lifetime. We only have about 71 so far, but I curate that, and it's hard to get in because it's a curated bookstore where we are saying we want to point you in a direction. So you'll see, of course, How Europe Underdeveloped Africa by Walter Rodney, The Wretch of the Earth by Frantz Fanon, The Black Woman by Tony K. Bombara, Black Reconstruction in America by W.E.B. Du Bois, Detroit, I Do Mind Dying by Dan Yorkos and Marvin Serkin, The Whole History of Weak Charged Genocide by William L. Patterson, The Manner of Charged Genocide by Gerald Horne, Hammer and Hull by Robin D.G. Kelly, the biography of Louise Thompson Patterson, great books by Shirley Graham Du Bois. It's a beautiful bookstore. And what's great about it is every book there is great. And if you're in LA on April 26th and 27th, we're going to be at the LA Times Book Festival, where we have a massive booth now run by Channing Martinez and myself with all our 65 titles, including some great children's books, Black and Third World children's books. Next to it, we have the Strategy and Soul Film Theater, which is a 100-seat theater with digital cinema projection, Dolby surround sound, a professional, top-of-the-line, state-of-the-art film theater. So what do? We address what we call the totality of urban life. That is to say, we're not single issue or multi-issue. We're trying to achieve the whole country from a revolutionary perspective. But we pick issues. So we're a participant in the Police Free LAUSD Coalition, the Black Student Achievement Program. We also do Black Folks on Bikes, which is electrical bikes, to get bikes in the hands of South Central residents. The public transit doesn't work and the cars don't work. We're now part of the California Black Power Network, which is wonderful. And Akuna Uka, who's a graduate PhD student at USC, and Channing Martinez, co-director, are our key representatives. You'll meet Barbara La Holland, the associate director, with whom I've worked for more than 25 years to build a bus riders union. So we also do a lot of work with the Pan-African Film Festival and our dear comrades Ayoku Babu and Asanswa Olatunji. And we're in South Central, we're in Leimert Park, and we're Center for kind of art, culture, politics, and direct organizing. It would mean a lot to go on our bookstore and buy books. One, we need it because we're trying to build an online bookstore, but also it's the way to make the connection. If you say, dear Eric, man, I read your thing, and I think, what do you think of this? It's not as persuasive as, hey, Eric, I went on your site, and I got these couple of books. What do you think of that? Because life is about material support, right? There's no group. I never call a group, I swear, that I didn't give money to first or go on their site. You could do almost anything but get to yes. Because I don't want to call on and say you're doing great work and blah, blah, blah. And why isn't I contribute a little bit? So that's about taking action. That's enough. Channing Martinez, you could check him out. He just wrote a great article on Counterpunch about, what's the name of the film about the missing people in Brazil? But you'll fill it in. But the point is, Channing is a writer. He defines himself as Black, fauna, queer, revolutionary, and he's got deep ties to Belize. So we are third world. We are what we say. We are a Black, third world, Black-led, multiracial, third world, united front. And we try to get along with everybody. We'd love to get to know you, especially if I can say if you're Black, Latinx, and doing work in the community, but we'd love to hear from you. That's the main point.
Yeah, absolutely. Totally co-signed. So yes, thanks again, Eric. This was great. We're certainly going to have you on again for a part 2, even though this may be 2 parts, actually. So maybe, but it's either way, we're going to have you on again to discuss more of your work. But yeah, again, appreciate you for the time.
It was great. I really do appreciate it.
Likewise.
Yeah, thanks so much, Eric. We appreciate you.
All right. Talk to you soon.
Take care.
Bye.